Um, all right, 1 second. All right, get out of here. All right, there we go. All right, so this is social engineering attacks. I'm James Macdonald, and I'm joined by my partner, Gilbert Greene.
All right, so the contents of our talk will be a problem statement and solutions and contributions. We will discuss what is social engineering. We'll discuss and identify the characteristics of an attack. We will discuss the most common types of social engineering and solutions to subverting them. And we'll also have some closing remarks.
All right, so problem statement and our contribution. The causes of social engineering attacks is generally a lack of knowledge on the subject itself and ignorance in how both groups and individuals can contribute to the prevention of attacks.
Okay, the two solutions are social engineering attacks are something that can be avoided if not stopped altogether when equipped with proper knowledge. Another solution that is very beneficial is if you cultivate an environment of safe communication, accountability, and secure network as well as device usage habits.
So preliminary and background information. What is social engineering? Social engineering is a manipulation technique that targets and takes advantage of human error to attain private information, access, or other valuables. In the context of cybercrime, these human hacking scams lure unsuspecting users and administrators into exposing data, spreading malware infections, or giving access to restricted systems. Attacks can happen online, in person, and via other interactions. And we'll get into the other types of interactions.
Mm-hmm. So for the types of social engineering, we should preface by saying that there are many, many, many different forms of social engineering. In fact, if we were to cover all of them, this presentation would be just about the different types of social engineering, and it would go well over the time we're allotted for this presentation. The subsequent slides will therefore cover some of the most common variants of social engineering attacks.
So the common types of attacks, phishing, and subsequently spear phishing and spam phishing. We'll get into those. Then next up we have baiting. And then we have physical attacks. So this is like when you go into a place like physically and you take their data like kind of undercover. And one of the ways that you could do this is tailgating. Another way you could do this is pretexting, which you could also do physically and online. So we'll get into that. And then we'll talk about quid pro quo, DNS spoofing, cache poisoning, scareware, and watering hole attacks.
All right, so starting off phishing. In phishing, attackers pretend to be a trusted institution or individual or group of individuals in an attempt to persuade you into exposing personal data and other valuables. There are many different types of phishing, but they all fall into one of two of the following categories.
Yeah, so the first type of phishing is spam phishing. This is also known as mass phishing. Spam phishing is a widespread attack aimed at many users. So this would be like emails like that you would get, just random emails. These attacks are non-personalized and they try to catch any unsuspecting person. A famous example of spam phishing is one of the oldest in the internet culture, and it's the faux Nigerian prince, and that was an email, if I remember correctly.
All right. The next form of phishing, spear phishing, also known as whaling, is the weaponization of personalized info to target particular users. Whaling attacks specifically aim at high-value targets such as celebrities, upper management, and high-ranking government officials. This is popularly known as blackmail, but in the cyber context, it is obviously referred to as spear phishing instead.
So phishing methods and subsets. So other types of phishing would include voice phishing. So this would be like spam calls that you get that might show up on your phone as like spam. Um, and or like something like the other day, I got one that was like about my car warranty, like it's not expiring. I know this type of stuff. And so should you. SMS phishing. This is like when you get a weird text message saying like maybe you FedEx or UPS tracking, or like you've won like a certain award or like a cruise or a reward. Email phishing. So this is like the Nigerian prince kind of thing. Angler phishing. So this is like when the attacker, they make like, this is social media type of phishing. So like the attacker would make like fake LinkedIn accounts and then connect with people like higher ups at companies and try to make connections with them and gain their trust, and then have them kind of open up to the attacker and give them personal info or company secrets. Search engine phishing. So this would be like if you search something and then the link that you are given or the address is not right, or it redirects you to a site that has malware on it where you subsequently download malware. The next one would be URL phishing, and then in-session phishing.
All right. Baiting attacks take advantage of one's natural curiosity in order to coax them into exposing themselves to an attacker. There are two ways in which a person can be baited. The less common one is physical, for USB drives and similar objects that are left in public places in the hope someone will use them. One could argue that key card readers attached to ATMs or anywhere where you would swipe a card in a public place are also an example of physical phishing. And then online phishing, which is like 100% the most prevalent, involves email attachments that include details on free offers or fraudulent softwares.
So physical attacks or physical breaches. This is when a hacker pretends to represent a known trusted vendor for the company in order to gain access. This could be like what we're going to get to. The attacker could dress up as, say, like a maintenance person, or they could just be blending in with certain crowds in order to gain access to the front door, whereas you would need a key card to enter the building. This type of attack usually is quite risky and can require a bit of research before it takes place. The research being on the part of the attacker, they would have to do research on what the company has to offer in terms of like what you're going to be stealing from them, and then how you would be selling or dispersing this information. If you have a buyer for this information, usually it's sold on the dark web. And these type of attacks usually only take place when the attacker has identified a clear potential for a high value reward upon their success. So again, that's if they know that they can make money off of this, they're only going to do it that way, really.
All right. And one of the more interesting and mind-bending ones is tailgating. And essentially what this is attackers role-playing and messing with social courtesy to get people to hold doors for them. A popular method is that they act like they're carrying a very heavy box. And when you see somebody carrying a very heavy box in a public environment, you don't really go out of your way to bother them, and you kind of just assume that they're doing something important, call it a day. These guys kind of play off that assumption. And another thing they do, which is the craziest, is that they'll dress up like a maintenance worker and they'll just carry a ladder around with them so that you'll just think, again, just like with the box, that they're doing something important and you shouldn't bother them. And another funny one is when they can like join like a group. It could be a group of smokers, or people who just hang outside, like go on a break near the building, and then you can hang around them for a few days, and then once people get to know your face, you kind of just sneak in with them. So security will look at you and just say that, oh, he works here. He's been hanging out with the guys who have been going on break. And yeah.
So pretexting attacks. So pretexting is a deceptive identity as the pretext for establishing trust, such as directly impersonating a vendor or facility employee. This approach requires the attacker to interact with you more proactively. The exploit follows once they've convinced you they are legitimate. So again, this is like a lot of social engineering, or most of it. It's a trust thing and a psychological thing. Build up your trust between someone who's higher up at the company or just an employee of the company. They're going to want to make you, they're going to want to say yes. They're going to want to make you happy. They want to please you if you're from a different company. Yeah, so it's really just trust.
Okay, quid pro quo attacks. Quid pro quo, first off, is a term that roughly translates to a favor for a favor. In the context of phishing, this means in exchange of personal info for some form of promised reward or compensation. Fake giveaways or offers to take part in research studies might expose you to this type of attack. And this exploit often comes in the form of inciting excitement in the prospective victim for something of value that could be achieved through relatively minimum investment or effort, like filling out like a form with like your personal information on it, sending in your mother's maiden name, or like the last 4 digits of your social security card, or the password to how you access a site or a service. And then the attacker will simply take that from you and just obviously not fulfill their promised end of the bargain.
So DNS spoofing. DNS spoofing manipulates a prospective victim's web browser and web servers in order to travel to malicious websites when a legitimate URL is entered. Once infected with this exploit, the redirects will continue unless the inaccurate routing data is cleared from the affected system.
Okay, and cache poisoning attack. Cache poisoning attack specifically infests a prospective victim's device with routing instructions that can take their legitimate URLs, or like a series of legitimate URLs, and connect the user on the way to those destinations through fraudulent websites, grabbing personal information along the way.
So scareware attacks. Scareware is a form of malware used to frighten a prospective victim into taking an action. This deceptive malware uses alarming warnings that report fraudulent malware infections, or claims that one or more of the prospective victim's accounts have been compromised. As a result, scareware pushes people to purchase fraudulent cybersecurity software or divulge private details, such as account credentials.
Okay, and watering hole attacks. Watering hole attacks infest popular web pages with malware in order to impact as many prospective victims at a time as they can. This method requires careful planning on the part of the attacker. In order to find weaknesses in a specific site, they look for existing vulnerabilities that are unknown and unpatched. Alternatively, an adversary may find that a site has not updated their infrastructure to patch out known issues. This can happen in the case where, more often than you would think, developers or admins will keep stable branches in operation as long as they can, and they'll simply add on to them. So an attacker who's knowledgeable of the system can go in and abuse this and target the recently patched branch, but still exploit those same vulnerabilities. Or if the patch has not been tested properly, they can exploit recently patched in vulnerabilities.
So prevention, thankfully there are ways of which individuals or groups or individuals can prevent and subvert social engineering attacks. There's far less social engineering attack, or there's far less ways of prevention than there are attacks. So it's a lot easier to do the prevention. And the preventions will close out the tail end of our presentation.
Okay. Now, all of these prevention methods may seem very obvious to us, but the average person, believe it or not, isn't as technically literate as computer science and computer engineering majors. So the very first prevention method, and the most obvious, is do not open emails and attachments from suspicious sources. Just don't do it, especially if you're not on a company email, because in that case, you won't just be losing stuff that's personal, you'll be losing stuff that's related to your job. And not only are you going to be compromised, you're going to be jobless. If you do not know the sender in question, you need not answer the email. Even if you do know the sender and are still suspicious of their message, there are many ways you can cross-check and confirm through other sources whether or not this is a legitimate message. You can, for instance, telephone or call the person whose email address this is allegedly from. You can go directly to a service provider's site, and they normally have disclaimers on all of their About Us pages or anything regarding correspondence that says members of our team will not ask you about this, this, and this. And if you're being asked for this, this, and this, then that's probably a fraudulent email. And remember that email addresses are spoofed all of the time. Even an email purportedly from a trusted source may have actually been initiated by an attacker.
So multi-factor authentication is another way you can protect against social engineering attacks. One of the most valuable pieces of information attackers seek are user credentials, so logins, usernames, passwords. Using multi-factor authentication services helps ensure that accounts are protected in the event of a system compromise. So I'm sure many of you have seen or know that FAU uses multi-factor through our login process with my FAU. So that's another way, one extra step of security.
The next step of prevention methods is be wary of temptation. If an offer sounds too enticing or too good to be true, it just might be. You should think twice before accepting offers based on appearance alone. This is another common sense tactic, but Googling the topic that is presented before you can quickly determine whether or not you're dealing with a trap or the offer of a lifetime. Like, for instance, many of these scams are well documented with people writing forum posts or Reddit posts about them. And if you just simply Google like a few keywords from the email you got, you should be able to learn whether or not with relative ease if you're facing a scam.
So fourth and final, keep your anti-software up to date. Though this is a controversial topic among the technically literate, the fact of the matter is the best known solution to combat most attacks is antivirus and or anti-malware software, and having that installed on your computer. Making sure automatic updates are engaged, or make it a habit to download these updates regularly, the latest ones obviously. Periodically scan your system for possible infections so that if you are tricked into downloading harmful software, you can locate it in your system early to minimize the damage. And remarks. Obviously, I think that just education on social engineering attacks and attacks in general, especially for big companies, is very key for that. And I do think that they hold conferences, if not yearly, for people who are not technically literate, definitely knowing like what to do, what to look out for and stuff like that, And
it was as James touched on earlier that there are less ways to prevent a social engineering attack than there are social engineering attacks themselves. So if you practice common sense and you stay alert, particularly when you're viewing emails, because that seems to be kind of like the hub for all of these things, you're not really going to be going to less reputable sites at work if you're actually doing your job responsibly. But yeah, so just practice common sense, be wary, be less prone to emotion, especially again going through your emails.
Yep. And some of the ones to look out for just like are really the emails, phishing in general. So like texts and voice like calls to
But also be wary of like physical social engineering as well, like people trying to, like for instance, the whole carrying a heavy box, or if there's a random USB stick just sitting on a table, you probably shouldn't stick that in your laptop. That probably sounds like a way to have a bad time.
Yeah. So, and these are our references. We used way more.
There will be way more.
Yeah. So thank you guys.
Thanks, guys.